Hello everyone, welcome back to the Stitches in STEM YouTube channel. My name is Michaela, I'm a knitter from Dublin, Ireland, and this is podcast episode number 11. It's been 2 weeks since my last episode, and I do feel like I have a lot of progress on my projects, or rather, I feel like I have a lot of words to say, but not a lot of substance. Like I have some finished objects and lots of whips, but I don't feel like I have typical kind of podcast style updates for them. It might not make sense, but hopefully it will as we go on. I do have one new cast-on that I might frog, and I have another cast-on that I'm actually very excited for, and I have a very exciting acquisition that I'm really looking forward to showing you. So if you like chaotic knitting podcasts, you might like this episode. I hope you stick around either way, and of course if you enjoy the video, please do give it a thumbs up. It would really help the channel. And if you want to stick around, I usually do uploads every 2 or 3 weeks. I would love it if you hit the subscribe button and joined our little community here on the Stitches in STEM YouTube channel. And with that out of the way, let's just get into the episode. Actually, one thing, I do have a really busy day today, and I actually have to leave my house in like an hour, so I'm going to try and get through everything. I don't want to rush because I don't like rushing. I don't like watching podcast episodes where it's rushing, so I'd rather stop filming when it gets to the time that I have to leave and continue filming tomorrow, because I won't be home for the rest of the evening, so I might have to do that. I also have notes in front of me, because if I don't, I'll ramble and then I will be here all day. So yeah, if you see me looking down, it's at my notes. Hello, I'm about to start recording my B-roll footage, and if the sound is different, it's because my microphone was not plugged in for the entirety of that episode. So I didn't realise until I started editing, and actually during filming I noticed on my viewfinder that the sound wasn't recording, but I just thought that the mic had briefly disconnected, so I turned it off and on again and didn't bother to check that it was actually working. So yeah, I have to laugh at myself because this episode has been a technical nightmare to record and edit, but it's entirely my own fault. Like, the microphone wasn't plugged in, so it didn't work. My battery died because I didn't charge it, and I accidentally deleted B-roll footage that I need, and now it's gone forever, and that was also my own fault. So it's hard to be frustrated because I find it comical how many things could go wrong when recording this. And I did debate re-recording it, but that wouldn't have felt authentic, and I still had fun recording and editing it, so yeah, it's grand, and hopefully the next one will go a bit smoother, but for now, let's just get back to the episode. Also, I did get the episode recorded on the day, but I didn't have enough time for B-roll footage, so I'm actually recording this a few days later. So there are some continuity errors in some of my projects, like my Rivendell Cardigan. I actually got half of the button band done over the last few days, and I also added a few squares to my blanket, so yeah. And I'm also wearing something different, so in case you're wondering why everything looks a bit different, that's why. It's not a big deal, but just to clear it up. Okay, let's get back to the episode. Very briefly, I am wearing my tee number 1, which is a pattern by My Favourite Things Knitwear. I finished this back in April or May, I think, and I discussed it in podcast episode 4 or 5. I can't remember, it was around that time. I can link it down below if you want to watch it. But yeah, it's a pattern by My Favourite Things Knitwear. It's a saddle shoulder t-shirt, and I really like it. I was going to wear my first finished object today, but it's actually quite warm out, so it's overcast, but it's quite, I can feel it's humid. It's a bit muggy, as they like to say. So yeah, it's too warm for my first finished object, which coincidentally is my Courage Henley. This is a test knit for Tori U or Tori Knits NYC, and it's a saddle shoulder Henley style top. It's made with worsted weight yarn. I used Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino in the colour Dark Ochre, and I worked on 4mm needles for the body and 3mm for the ribbing. In the last episode this was blocked and the ends were woven in, but I just hadn't sewn on the buttons, so as you can see I have done that now, so it is officially a finished object, and I really like it. I haven't worn this out yet, but I can definitely see it being a regular feature of kind of my everyday wardrobe. I did mention in the last episode about the neckline that I thought it was a bit wide and I would have to wear deep scoop necks or v-necks. Sorry, my microphone, hit the microphone. I would have to wear deep scoop necks or v-necks with it, but since putting on the buttons I've realised I actually like to wear it with 2 of the buttons closed, which obviously tightens in the neckline. I still do have to wear scoop necks or v-necks. I wouldn't be able to wear a crew neck that goes all the way up to here, but I think it does kind of broaden the range for what I can wear with this. So yeah, I can definitely see this being a very regular feature in my wardrobe. The pattern is due for release on the 12th of October, so I'm not going to give my final thoughts because it obviously hasn't been finalised. I also haven't given my feedback to Tori yet, so it wouldn't be right to give it, here and now before telling her. But I will say that my feedback is positive. As it stands right now, it's a very well written pattern. It's easy to follow, it's clear. If you're looking for a saddle shoulder Henley, I do recommend this one. And as for the yarn, I really love it. I've talked about it before. I've said that it won't be my last time working with it. I'd love to hold it with a mohair and make a jumper out of it, I think. at some point in the future. I definitely have way too many projects planned for the next few months, but I would definitely love to work with this yarn again in the future, and I especially love the colour. I just think, yeah, the colour was a real winner for me. I'm really excited to wear this over the autumn months. As a side note, whenever I mention yarns like Knitting for Olive or Sandnes Garn or Isair, I inevitably get questions from Irish viewers asking where I get these yarns from, and I was thinking I might like make a spreadsheet of, you know, where you can get these yarns, and I want to do it in such a way that if you want to buy Sandnes Garn and Knitting for Olive, you'll be able to filter to show shops that sell both of those. So I think I'll be able to do that. I just need to find the time to do it, and I don't know how I'll make it available. Like, is it good? It's going to be like, I suppose it will have to be like a shared link of some sort. I don't know. I've never really done that, so I'll make up the spreadsheet anyway. Initially I was thinking I would just put them in Instagram stories, but then I thought it would be nice to, as I said, be able to filter and show shops that sell both Isair and Filcolana or something like that. So, you know, I was going to include brands like Sandnes Garn, Knitting for Olive, Filcolana, Isair, Gepard Garn, and those are the ones I can think of right now. But if you're an Irish viewer and you have any other ideas of which brands I could throw in there, let me know and I'll make sure to include it. I'm actually getting so warm in this t-shirt already. It's 14 degrees out, like it's not that warm, but I just feel like it's really humid or something. My next finished object is a pair of Shortie vanilla socks, and the yarn is Life in the Long Grass fine sock in the colour Jellyfish, and I knit these on 2mm needles. In the last episode I had worked the cuff of one of the socks, but I hadn't yet bound, oh no, I had bound off, I just hadn't cut the yarn or woven the ends. And on the other sock I was just about to start the cuff. These are for my mum, but I don't know how wearable they'll be. I had 45 grams of this yarn left over from a previous pair of socks, so I worked some toe up and this is all I got out of the 45 grams. They're the same length as commercial ankle socks that I own, but they're just not as elastic. Like, they do stretch but they don't cinch in as much, and if I made them any tighter they wouldn't, you know, go over the ankle. So yeah, I just had to make do, and that's why I did a twisted rib cuff, just to give it a bit more tightness but also elasticity. I did a fish lips kiss heel and 7 rows of stockinette after the heel, and then I did 7 rows of twisted rib for the cuff, and I bound off with Jenny's surprisingly stretchy bind off, which I actually really like. This is my first time using that bind off and I don't know what I expected, but yeah, it turned out like it exceeded my expectations. I really like it and I'll definitely use it again in the future. It is surprisingly stretchy. So these have been blocked since last weekend, so like a week ago, and I just haven't taken them off the blockers yet because I just haven't gotten around to it. That sounds so stupid because it's obviously not a job. I just have left these on the blockers, but I think I was waiting to show them on the episode before I gave them to my mum, because if I took them off the blockers I probably would have just given them to my mum. But I wanted to show them all nice and blocked, and I will give them to her today. I am glad I made them. I got the yarn out of stash, and I also calculated how much yarn was used up in 5 rounds of the stockinette part. So from now on I should be able to make cuff down socks with limited amount of yarn and calculate exactly how long I can make the leg out of that amount of yarn. So that's all I have to say about those. This is kind of what I meant when I said, you know, I had a lot of words but not a lot of substance. Like, I have 2 finished objects and I don't feel like I have much to say on them, but sure, look, that's how it goes. So we'll move on to whips. The first whip is my Sweet Shop blanket, which is a pattern by Laura Penrose. As always, it's too big to put on camera, so I'll put some footage here. The yarn that I'm using is the Olivia and Oliver Fibres 2023 Advent Calendar with Knitting for Olive Merino in the colour Cloud, and both yarns are held double and I'm working on 4mm needles. So I now have 150 squares done, which is huge, and I only have 4 squares to go on the last row, and then depending on how much leftover yarn I have, I may or may not add another column of squares at the end. So at the moment I have 11 squares across and 14 squares down, but I might have enough to add another column, so it'll be 12 squares across and 14 squares down, which will bring the total number of squares to 168. In the last episode I said I was running out of steam. Since then, once I hit kind of 135 squares, so I had about 30-ish squares left to go, assuming I was doing 168 squares, I definitely got a bit of a second wind. Like, this week alone I've added 12 squares already and the week's not even over, so I'll probably add a few more, and 12 is the most number of squares that I've ever added in one week, so I'm already kind of ahead of schedule. If I can keep that pace, I should have it finished by the end of next week. At least all the squares added. We'll talk about the ends in a minute. I will hopefully have at least all the squares added by next week. I will have to push myself a bit, that will be quite actively working on it. I have been prioritizing this over whips that I actually want to work on, but I know that future Michaela will thank me for getting this done and off the needles so I can work on those without feeling guilty about neglecting this. I will say I love how it's looking. The fade is turning out so well. I'm so pleased with the colour layout and how I selected it. If you're new here, the Advent was a circular fade, so it did start with the pinks and then it faded into the browns, which are at the bottom, and then it faded into the greens, which can fade back into the pinks. So essentially you can start your Advent at any point and it will fade through the whole 24 skeins or mini skeins. I obviously started with the browns, which faded into the greens, the yellows, and then the pinks, the purples, the darker colours now, and I'm just so happy with how it looks. I think the fade for me really came together once I hit these last few rows, and the very dark pinks and purples started to, I think, bring it all together. So yeah, I'm really excited by how it's looking. I will hold it up just to talk about the ends, which I have been avoiding. I did mention a good few episodes ago now that I tested out tying the ends in, like these 4 squares here, I just tied the ends in a double knot and I cut them very close to that knot. And some of those knots have come undone. The ends are woven in using the weave and steven method, so I didn't just tie the ends without weaving them in. I wove them in first and then I tied them together. But the weave and steven method only weaves the ends in one direction, so I was worried about them coming loose, which is why I tied them. And yeah, some of the knots have come undone. So that's not what I'm going to do for the rest of the blanket. I'm still going to tie them in knots, but I'm going to cut a little bit away from the knot so that there's a bit of a tail. I think I just cut too close to the knot. I know the blanket won't unravel, but I don't want these long ends at the back. And if I cut the yarn without tying them in knots, the ends might, you know, come loose out of the stitches that they're woven into, if that makes sense. And then the corners where each of the squares meet will become a little bit loose, and I think it will not look great. So I do want to tie them in knots and just leave a little bit of an end so they don't come undone. This should definitely be a finished object in the next episode. Fingers crossed. My next whip is the Rivendell Cardigan, which is a pattern by Sari Nordland. This is a V-neck cabled cardigan. It just has cables coming down the sleeve and down the front. I might try and throw in some B-roll footage instead because it's obviously quite awkward to carry and there's a bunch of needle stoppers and things hanging out of it, so it's going to be a bit clanky, but we'll see. It's a drop shoulder cardigan, but I've modified it to be a saddle shoulder-ish construction so that the sleeve cable runs all the way up to the neck. If you've watched the last few episodes, I probably sound like a broken record saying that, but I always have to say it in case someone's seeing this for the first time. The yarn that I'm using is Sandnes Garn Tin Pure Gint in the colour 4672, that's colour number, and Filcolana Tilia in the colour Amethyst. And I'm working the body on 3.5mm needles, the ribbing on 3mm needles, and the double knit button band on 2.5mm. This whip is in a pure state of chaos, so let me just talk through. The first sleeve is done but not bound off. The hem is done but not bound off. The second sleeve over here is ready for ribbing, and I have started the double knit button band. So everything is in a state of progress. Nothing is done, but we're getting there. In the last episode I was still working on the second sleeve and I hadn't started the button band, so that's the progress that I've made. The topic of yarn amount and yarn chicken has been a hot one with this project. In the last episode I discussed the likelihood of having to frog the sleeve to take some of the yarn to finish the button band. I have since blocked it, and I did stretch the sleeve but not to the limit. So I stretched it and I pinned it, but I didn't want to distort it, and I wanted to keep the width in the sleeve as well, so I didn't want to make it any narrower by stretching it lengthwise. But yeah, I did pin it and stretch it out, and it's definitely too long now, so I can take yarn off it if I need to. I'll definitely need to shorten it anyway, so that's why I haven't finished the second sleeve, because I wanted to finish the first sleeve and get the length right before I obviously mirrored that on the second sleeve. The body also lengthened a bit with blocking, but I quite like the length, so I'm not going to shorten it. Okay, and then the button band. I have never worked a double knit button band before, and a few people commented on a video, I think two episodes ago. They said to start the button band from the back if I was worried about yarn chicken, because, you know, I can just shorten the body if I need to. So that's what I'm doing. But before doing that, I did do a little kind of practice swatch because I wanted to figure out my gauge. So I picked up just along the very bottom corner, along the ribbing and the cable section, I picked up 3 in every 4 stitches, about 25 stitches total. and I just worked a double knit button band, and I was pretty happy with the gauge. There was no bunching, there was no ruffling. I thought that was the way to go. So then I went back and I picked up 3 in every 4 stitches the whole way round up to the middle of the back neck. So I actually cast on the stitches with a crochet provisional cast on because I'm obviously going to be working down the other side as well, so I just thought that would be easier for picking up the stitches. And then I started working the double knit button band, and I got about halfway down, and up until that point I did kind of think the pickup rate might be a little bit too tight. It was curving, but it wasn't ruffling, and the fact that it was curving around the back wasn't really concerning because that is going to curve around the back of my neck anyway, so I couldn't really tell if it was the button band that was curving or it was the fact that it was going from the back neck down to the shoulder section. So I decided to keep going with it, and I got about halfway through, and whatever it was about one particular row that I worked, all of a sudden a massive bulge just appeared in the cardigan. I took a picture of it, I'll put it in here. So yeah, that was my decision made. I had to frog it, and at that point I'd worked about 70 rows of the double knit button band, or sorry, 70 stitches of the double knit button band, which means I had worked a total of like 140 rows back and forth. So it was a lot of work to frog, but it was actually only one day's work. I kind of got really into a rhythm with the double knit button band, so it didn't take too much time, but it was obviously a lot of knitting. So I also weighed the yarn at that point, and those 70 rows used about 9 grams of the yarns held together. So I frogged it and I picked up the stitches again. This time I picked up almost every stitch except for around the corner again, where I picked up 5 in every 6 stitches because again I wanted to keep that curve. And I picked up a total of 195 stitches, I think. So considering the other half of the cardigan, that will be a total of 390 stitches. So then I just used that 9 grams of yarn per 70 rows calculation to figure out that 390 rows would use roughly 50 grams of the yarns held together, and the yarns held together, 2/3 of that would be the tin peer gint, which is about 34 grams or so, and I have about 47 grams of the tin peer gint. So I don't think yarn chicken is going to be a problem anymore. I hope I don't have to eat my words in the next episode, but I think we're in the clear. Anyway, I picked up the double knit button band a few days ago, and this is what I have so far. Not much, and it is taking a while. I can see why people don't like double knit button band. I personally don't mind the knitting process. Obviously the visual progress is quite slow, so I prefer to work in it when I have big blocks of time where I can actually see the progress I've made, as opposed to in 20 minutes, you know, if I only get a few rows done and I don't, you know, it doesn't look like a lot and it's a bit disheartening. So I don't know how long it's going to take me to finish the whole thing, but once it's done I obviously need to fix the first sleeve. I will need to rip back and redo the ribbing, and then I'll need to finish the second sleeve. There's a lot of ends to weave in. I've already woven in a good chunk of them, but I need to weave in a lot more, and so on the buttons. And look, I'm going to be honest, none of that is the fun stuff. Like, the fun part is done. The cables, the maths, the calculations, all the modifications, that was fun. The rest of it is not going to be fun, but I'm motivated by the thought of me wearing it. Like, I have a mental image of me wearing this cardigan that I've put so much time and effort into, and that is motivating me to get through it. So I do hope that it's done by the next episode, but that might be wishful thinking. Like, that's maybe a little bit ambitious to get the whole button band done, and I think the sleeves will be fine. They won't take too long to do, like just the ribbing basically. So yeah, we'll see. Next whip is the Ranunculus by Midori Hirase. This is another project that has a bunch of needles and stoppers and things hanging out of it, so I do apologise for any banging or clanging. I'm using Suic Whisper lace in the colour 133, held double on 6mm needles, and I used 5.5mm needles for the neckline. It's a wool and silk blend. I think it's 60% wool, 40% silk. Oh no, 70% wool and 30% silk, I think. I'll put up on the screen. One thing I forgot to mention in the last episode is that the yoke is the same for all sizes. I think that's really interesting. I mean, I suppose it's quite oversized, so maybe that's why it fits all sizes very well, but I didn't even notice that the yoke was the same size until I got to after the yoke, and all of a sudden I had to find my stitch number in, you know, a row of numbers in brackets, and I was kind of realised that I hadn't had to do that up until that point. So I think that's really interesting and not something that I hear a lot of people talking about. So and that's also why I didn't mention what size I was making in the last episode, because I wasn't making any particular size. I am making a size 1, which should give me 10 inches of positive ease. I also didn't realise the neckline is supposed to have a twisted rib or half twisted rib. I only noticed when I was watching Young Folk Knit's video on Ranunculus modifications, and I've actually watched that video before, so there was no reason why I should have watched it a second time. But when I did, she mentioned that there was the collar was a half twisted rib, and I had to pause and go back and be like, what? It's half twisted rib? And I looked at mine, I looked at the pattern, and I realised I had completely done that wrong. But it's fine. I just did a regular rib, and I'm probably going to do a regular rib for the cuff and the hem as well, just to match. So I did a mid-project block because I wanted to try it. I figured I should try it on in this episode, but when I did try it on, it was absolutely tiny, and I didn't want anyone looking at it and thinking, does she realise how small that is? Because my swatch grew so much. It grew from 18 stitches in 10 centimetres to 14 stitches in 10 centimetres, and that's the pattern gauge. So I was not worried, but trying it on, I figured that somebody else watching it might be thinking that's tiny. So I thought it would be better to show you instead of me just insisting that, guys, it will grow, I promise. But it was hard to get pre-blocking footage because unfortunately we're running out of daylight here in Ireland. It's getting quite dim in the evenings. It was too dark anytime I had a free moment in the evening to record any pre-blocking footage. So I finally managed to get some yesterday. And then I realised I had to block this before the episode today. So only for the fact that it's such a loose gauge is it dry right now, less than 24 hours after initially blocking it. I didn't stretch it, but I did pin it, so the growth is entirely due to the yarn, which I think is just really, I've never seen a yarn grow so much. Anyway, after putting so much thought and planning into getting my pre-blocking footage, about 20 minutes ago, right before I sat down to record, I was going through my camera roll, deleting last week's episode clips, and of course didn't I delete the pre-blocking footage that I recorded. As soon as my finger hit the erase button, it was like an out of body experience. I watched myself hit the erase button thinking, why are you doing that? Don't delete that. And now it's gone. So I don't think my camera has a recycle bin feature. Maybe if I plug it into my laptop I might be able to recover it somehow, but I'm not too hopeful. You just have to take my word for it that before blocking it had negative ease almost, or yes, I would say 0 to negative ease. Around the sleeve especially, it just hugged my arm. There was no positive ease whatsoever. It's obviously grown quite a lot, and actually when I tried it on just before recording to get this post-blocking footage, I was immediately drawn, in a bad way, to the wide neckline. It's not what I had hoped for or planned. The pattern has 2 neckline options, and I initially cast on for the small one, but it was very much a crew neck right up here. I could get it over my head, but it was, as I said, it was right up to my neck, and I didn't like it. I kind of wanted like this kind of neckline here. So I cast on for the wide neckline, and before blocking, this is what it looks like. Obviously after blocking, it's after stretching out a lot. I kind of thought the cast on would keep it in shape, but obviously that didn't happen. So I'm trying to think if there's some way I can fix it. It's too big to put elastic in and hope for the best. I think it would cause too much scrunching. I'm wondering if I can insert a lifeline just below the ribbing, cut the ribbing, cast on new ribbing in the smaller neckline, and once the ribbing is done then kind of graft the 2 live edges together. Is that possible? It should be possible. I think there would need to be a row of stockinette just below the ribbing as it is right now for me to do that, but I think there is one. So yeah, as I said, I just tried it on about right before recording, so these are very much fresh thoughts. I don't really know, but if anyone has any suggestions, I would love to hear it. If I can't fix it, I don't think it's the end of the world. I think I'll still wear it. I think it just limits what I can wear under it. Like I'd have to wear a strappy camisole, I think. But maybe I'll become one of those people who makes a million ranunculuses, and every podcast I watch where they talk about multiple ranunculus, they have that debate where it's like ranunculi, ranunculuses, I don't know. So yeah, maybe I'll become one of those people who makes multiple ranunculuses or ranunculi or whatever, and this one will be my wide neckline one, and I'll make another one with a narrow neckline. So it's fine. I will still wear it regardless. I just think I would get more wear out of it with the narrower neckline. So yeah, I'm going to try and fix it, and if I can't, it's fine. It's very much a background project for me. It's not a passion project. I just cast it on at a time when I wanted to cast something on. So I'm not putting myself under any pressure to work on it or to finish it. I don't know when it will be done, but that's okay. I'm also on Sleeve Island now. I'm working the sleeves on Magic Loop, which is not my preferred method, but that's what I'm stuck with. I usually work sleeves on 40cm cables, but I don't have short 4-inch needles or needle tips in the 6mm size to work these sleeves. I also have a smaller needle on the left. I have a 5mm needle on the left to make it easier to slide the stitches onto it. So I would have to buy 2 short needle tips in sizes that I don't use that often. So I just don't think it's worth it. Anyway, that's my Ranunculus. Let's move on to the next whip, which is a new cast-on. This is a very basic 1x1 ribbed beanie that I'm making for my sister for Christmas. The yarn is Sandnes Yarn Double Sunday in the colour Coffee Bean, and I bought this when I was in a yarn shop in Helsinki. I was actually with my sister and I asked her if she wanted me to make her a hat and she could pick out some yarn. And she didn't come to the yarn shop with me, but she told me she just wanted a brown. So I thought she would pick something a bit more exciting. But anyway, I bought this and it's taken me this long to cast this on, and now I'm thinking I'll just give it to her for Christmas. So I was planning on following the Pearl Soho pattern for this. I think it's basic ribbed beanie or classic ribbed beanie. But the gauge is 31 or 32 stitches and 10 centimeters, and I'm working on 3mm needles and my gauge is 27 or 28 stitches or something like that. So I don't know what kind of sorcery they're using to get 31 or 32 stitches in 10 centimeters using a DK weight yarn. It doesn't make sense to me, but I mean, I know I'm a loose knitter, but usually I can go down a needle size and I get gauge. It just wasn't happening with this, so I decided to just calculate my own circumference based on my gauge. I measured some of my other beanies and I just calculated how many stitches to cast on to reach the same circumference as those. I cast on 104 stitches using a tubular cast on, and I did the tubular cast on 2.5mm needles, and then I went up to 3mm needles for the ribbing. My battery's about to die. If my battery dies, I won't have time to charge it and continue filming before I have to leave, so I will definitely have to record the rest of this tomorrow. Somehow the hat is a little bit smaller than I calculated. It does fit, but it's tight. If it was for me, I wouldn't mind. I don't really mind tight beanies, but I know not everyone likes that, so that's why I mentioned at the start that I have a new cast on that I might frog. It's this one. I might frog it and cast on more stitches. I'm going to work another inch or so and then make a judgment call. It's going to be a single folded beanie because I only have 2 balls of the yarn. For the crown, I'm going to do something similar to the Stockholm hat by Petite Knit. I don't have the pattern, but I do have the Brownstone beanie by Tori Yu, which has a similar shape. So I'm just going to fudge that and figure out some decreases that will work to get the same kind of crown shaping. So yeah, that's all I have to say about that project. I don't know what stage it's going to be at in the next episode because, as I said, I might frog it, but hopefully it will at least be done before Christmas. My last whip is also a new cast on, and this is the Ingrid Sweater by Petite Knit. This is all I have so far. The yarn that I'm using is Eru BFL Romney in the colour Sea Song, and this was gifted, and I'm holding it together with Gepard Garn Kidsetta in the colour Light Sea Green, number 812. The pattern recommends a few different yarn weights to hold with a mohair. So one of them, for example, is Sandnes Yarn Peer Gynt, which is a heavy DK, light, well, I wouldn't say it's worsted, but it's a heavy DK. Another one is Filcolana Pernilla, which is a sport weight. It's a fingering weight, and it's recommended that you hold either of those or others with a mohair. So overall, the yarn weight for the pattern is given as worsted, and the Eru BFL Romney is sport. So I figured I would hold it with a mohair and see if I could get gauge. Before I committed to that, I did do a swatch with stash mohair that I had because I didn't have mohair in this colour. So I did a swatch with some stash mohair that I had, and I did get gauge. The fabric is definitely probably not as dense as what is intended with the pattern, but I like the density of the fabric, so that's all that matters. It rarely gets cold enough in Ireland to justify a very dense worsted weight mohair jumper, so yeah, I'm quite happy with the fabric. So once I worked up my gauge swatch, I ordered the mohair from a French yarn shop called Lilycom 2, and they emailed me a few days after placing my order to tell me that the yarns were different dye lots. So that stressed me out a little bit. I asked them to send me a photo. They did. I could see the difference in the photo, but it was very slight. So I decided to just continue with the order and I'd figure it out. So the yarn arrived much quicker than I expected, actually. I think it shipped on a Monday and it arrived, I think it shipped on a Friday and it arrived on the Thursday, which is quite fast, I thought. I'll show a close-up. Oh yeah, you can probably see it there as well, actually. There's definitely a difference. The top one is a little bit darker. But look, it's fine. Before I decided to continue with the order, I put a little question box on Instagram just to ask for other people's experience with different dye lots. Like, you know, did it turn out okay if you had different dye lots? And it was very much 50-50. Some people said, it's not worth it, don't continue with the order, order from somewhere else. And other people said, because it's texture, because you're holding it with wool, it'll be fine. So it was just interesting to see different perspectives, and I was just really impatient. I didn't want to order from anywhere else, so that's why I decided to continue with the order. Okay, my battery died and I charged it for like 5 minutes, so let's see if we can finish this because I really don't have much more to say. I'm swapping the mohair strands every 2 rows, and it is a short row section, so basically what I'm doing is when I reach the turn, the stitch that I turned, I pick up the old strand, which will be waiting there. I work with both strands until I need to turn again, so it's only a few stitches, and then once I turn, I drop the strand I've just been working with and continue working with the new strand. And so that way when I work the 2 rows, I get back to that turn stitch, the old strand is waiting there to repeat the process. And I'll show a close-up, but I really don't think it's visible. Even if I look for it, I can't see any difference, so I'm really happy with how it's turning out, and I think I took a risk, but it's working, so it's fine. I was waiting for the mohair to arrive so I could cast this on, and when it did, I was like a child on Christmas. I ran up to my room, I wound up a ball of the Aero yarn, and I immediately cast on. Like, I was so excited. I worked the back panel, and then I got it out of my system, and then I begrudgingly picked up my sweet shop blanket and added some more squares to that. So this is my motivation to finish my sweet shop blanket and my Rivendell cardigan. I'm just really enjoying working on it. I love the fabric it's producing, and I love the colour. I'm just so excited to keep working on this. In terms of acquisitions, apart from the Kidsetta I just showed, I did receive this yarn from Lavelier Fibres. Sierra, who runs it, very kindly sent me these yarns from her upcoming Ireland collection, which at the time I'm uploading should be available for pre-order on the Friday, which it is available on the Friday, but I can't remember if Friday is the 3rd or the 4th. I think it's the 4th. Friday 4th of October. Friday's the 4th. Basically that weekend, that Friday, the pre-order is available for purchase. And it's going to be open for a week or until her capacity is full. I've bought Sierra's yarn on 3 different occasions and I've loved it every time. Most recently I bought a jumper quantity of Tweed DK to make my weekender crew, and I was obsessed. I think her tonal colours are so special. She just does tonals so well. So if you're looking for a really nice Irish hand-dyed yarn, you can't go wrong with Lavelier Fibres. So she sent me 2 of each of these, so she sent me 4 skeins in total. This is her 4-ply sock base, which is 85% superwash merino and 15% nylon. And she sent me 2 skeins of the colour Lake Muskerry and 2 skeins of Wild Atlantic Way. I've never heard of Lake Muskerry before. It's obviously a place in Ireland. I must look it up because I don't know anything about it or where it is. Wild Atlantic Way is very special to me because during the pandemic, myself and my boyfriend did a road trip down the Wild Atlantic Way, which is basically all the west coast of Ireland. So in August 2020, we did the coast of Derry, Donegal and Sligo. In 2021, we did Mayo, Galway, Clare. And in 2022, we did Kerry and West Cork. So we did the whole west coast, and it was just spectacular. So amazing. Not something I ever would have done if we didn't have a pandemic. So I have that to be grateful for, I guess. That trip holds very special memories for me, and I think this colour encapsulates it perfectly. It's a very dusty, cool toned blue. It's got kind of undertones of grey, I think. But you know when yarn pre-orders have that one colourway that just steals the show? For me, that is Lake Muskerry. It is an absolutely gorgeous, deep teal colour. It's so hard to capture this colour on camera, so I'm going to try my best to put in some good close-up footage so you can really capture it. So yeah, those are the 2 yarns that Sierra very kindly sent me. As I said, she sent me 2 of each colour, and my plan is to make a Mackenzie scarf by Sari Nordland. It's a 2-colour brioche scarf, and I've never done brioche knitting or brioche. I know some people say, I've always said brioche in Ireland. I feel like we say like brioche buns or brioche bread, so I say brioche. I've never done brioche knitting, so it will be a challenge, but I'm ready for it. So yeah, very excited to use both of these beautiful yarns, and thank you again, Sierra, for sending them my way. And that is everything for today. My battery died twice, but I suppose that's all part of it, and if you made it this far, I'm really grateful. Thank you so much for sticking around. If you liked this episode, please do give it a thumbs up. If you want to see more, feel free to subscribe, hit the notification button so you don't miss an upload. We would love to have you over here at the Stitches and Stem YouTube channel, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Bye!